Hi folks, Rupert here. Actually, I'm on holiday, and normally I would have ignored this for now, but I couldn't leave this. The other day I was sent a link to a movie called You Won't Believe This Disturbing Göbekli Tepe Update. It's on a channel called Bright Insight, run by a chap called Jimmy Corsetti. The thing is that there's so much misinformation in this film, and the channel has 1.62 million subscribers, so potentially, including viewers who aren't subscribers, this could be going out to millions of people, and there's so much wrong with it that I really thought that something should be said soon. Now, there are many aspects of Jimmy's film that are misleading, and I'm not for a moment saying that he is being dishonest. I'm not calling him a liar. There's a huge difference between misinformation and disinformation, and this isn't willfully misleading. It's just biased and ill-informed, wrong interpretations. Now, big thing, Jimmy talks about a mind-blowing revelation that he'll tell you about at the end of the film, and I'll come back to that too, because there's some things to get out of the way first. Now, one thing to get out of the way, Jimmy only mentions this, but it's worth talking about because it's a misconception that's been hanging around for years. It's been known for a long time now that Göbekli Tepe wasn't deliberately buried. That hypothesis was put forward years ago, I think by Klaus Schmidt himself, as a possible explanation for the fill as far as it had been excavated at that point. But as excavations progressed, it became clear that the fill was caused by the fill. It was caused by gradual slumping and settling of the hill. And the most obvious evidence for this was that as they got lower in the excavation, some of the pillars had been pushed over by the weight of the slump, which that's something that couldn't have happened if it had been deliberately filled in from the bottom. It would have made the positions of the pillars more secure, not less. And less obvious, but dating from the fill showed that it was just a jumbled mess. Now, if you imagine, for example, if you've got a wall that's settled over time, and or even when it was built, actually, so you've got the old stuff at the bottom and the new stuff at the top. Now, if that at some point just the whole wall collapses, then what you get is this tumble down where you can even have the more recent stuff falling underneath the older stuff as it tumbles. So you just get this big mixture, and that's what the dating showed. The thing is that, as is often the case, the media pick up on something that's really exciting, and they tell the world, and everybody picks up on that information. And then, as more discoveries come to light, the thing is, if they're not exciting, then the media doesn't bother to report them, and the public at large is left with the old information. And the big problem is that unless you go seeking out the actual research papers that are based in the universities or wherever, then you're not going to get that, and you're not going to get that information. And obviously, most people don't go looking for the academic papers. They rely on the media to give them the information. Anyway, back to the film. Now, in the first few minutes, Jimmy is talking about the fact that such a small percentage of the site has been excavated, and, I quote, that doesn't even include a series of square rectangular compartments, he says. Now, what he shows you, the image that he shows you in that voiceover, is a photograph of the excavation grid, which anyone with any knowledge of archaeology would have recognised straight away, and he would have identified it as such if he had even once Googled archaeological excavations or something similar. Now, I'm not saying that everyone should know this, that you're stupid if you don't know this. What I am saying is that if you're going to make an accusatory film criticising people's work and motives, you should have at least looked up that kind of detail. For those of you who don't know, it depends on the scale of the excavations. It isn't always necessary. If it's just, say, a small burial site that has been uncovered, then it's small, it doesn't need dividing up. But on larger scales, excavations are divided up into a grid. So you've got squares A, B, C, D, your way around A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that as the excavations go on, everything important that can, not even important, everything that comes out of those soils, whether it's a piece of bone, a broken piece of pottery, not so much at Göbekli Tepe, microliths, flint blades, whatever it is, all those things that are found, they're catalogued with the number of the square in which they were found, with a name. And the thing is that what that tells you is that anybody who's looking at the excavation data after the event will know exactly where on that grid that item was found. Okay, so that's what it's looking at. They're not square compartments from thousands of years ago. The grid is purely for excavation efficiency, and it bears no relation to the shape of the structures below the surface. Jimmy goes on to talk about how only 5% of the site has been excavated, and that figure hasn't changed in the last 7 years. And he asks, how is it possible that no measurable advances have been made, and what is the hold-up? This is a tell. The thing about a tell is that you don't really know how deep it's going to be. The mounds get bigger over the centuries of human occupation. In fact, possibly the best example of this is the mound at Karanovo in Bulgaria, where the archaeologists have actually erected a pillar there against an excavated facade, marking out the levels of the mound through the millennia, right from Neolithic up to the Chalcolithic. So you can stand by that mound and you can see where, on your own body and going way up above your head, you can see where the ground level was over the periods of time. Now, just imagine, for example, the reason that the excavations at Göbekli Tepe are still around the 5% mark is because it's a tell. If it was a flat field in Wiltshire or Wisconsin with an excavation depth of, say, 1 metre, then yeah, excavations would be fairly quick, relatively. But imagine you've got a grid of 100 squares and you dig down. You're in one square 1, or you've started off with 10, and you start digging down. And the next season you're still digging down. You haven't got to the bottom, and you keep, and year on year you still haven't got to the bottom. The whole point about a tell is that the depth can be immense, and there's no point starting a new trench over there when you haven't even reached the bottom here. So at the end of each excavation season, on top of that, the team spend ages writing up their findings, making sure that all the cataloguing is done properly, and there is a reason these things are done meticulously. It takes time. That boar statue that we were all so excited about last year was at a depth of about 5 or 6 metres from the surface. So, nobody says, for example, how ridiculous it is that Çatalhöyük is at roughly the same percentage of excavation, regardless of the fact that it's been under excavation for 30 years longer. There's something about Göbekli Tepe just makes people lose the plot. Now, the thing is, it's over a century now since archaeology stopped being essentially glorified treasure hunting. It's all about the people and what we can find out about the people. Soil is scraped away carefully and slowly with each microlith, each tiny flint blade or whatever, catalogued. Types of stone vessels, animal bones, how did they change over time? And what does that tell us about how these people were living? Why is that important? Well, it's important for so many reasons, but without the rigour, you have nothing. Imagine you find pieces of worked flint or obsidian, whatever, with little chips napped off a core to make an axe. Now, you can make yourself a perfectly usable axe with a little know-how, and if you imagine then going backwards in sequence, putting it back together. The fragments that you've chipped away will reveal how that axe was made. Now, potentially quite random, but what if it's not random? If you collect all those seemingly unimportant fragments going down through, say, 2,000 years of soil, and you see that they reveal the same fragment shapes and the same technique, it shows you that that method was taught parent to child or teacher to student for generations and generations. Now, you've heard of Clovis culture, Gravettian, Solutrean, there's so many tool-making techniques that define a group of people in time. Now, without that painstaking cataloguing of finds, we would know none of this. If you brought in 10,000 volunteers to Göbekli Tepe with shovels, you could uncover the whole site in no time. But how would you deal with all that data? How could you possibly record all that without bringing in another few thousand volunteers to do all the cataloguing? You couldn't. Apart from the vast amount of damage caused by the footfall of thousands of people, you'd end up uncovering something, maybe something wonderful, but learning nothing. Who were those people? Don't know. We threw that shit away. It's see, all the ologies. It doesn't matter which one it is. A personal favourite of mine, geology. All the ologies, they require dogged determination and rigour. The whole body of human knowledge is born from these beautiful, nerdy people who painstakingly spend their lives poring through data that would make other minds go numb. A bit of a hero of mine. In the 1890s, there was a geologist called Arthur Rowe, and he was exploring cliffs on the coast of Kent, southeast England, the cliffs that show millions of years of strata there. And as he scrambled down, he spotted a fossil in the cliff face, prized it out, carried on down. By the time he'd got to the bottom, he'd collected a small number of fossils, and each noticeably different. These were all micrasters. He did a lot of study on micrasters, which are a kind of fossil sea urchin. Like a lot of fossil hunters, he was quite excited by this. So he decided to climb back up, being a bit more careful, and collecting as many fossils as he could as he went back up. And he carefully noted the order of each one as he went up. Now, when he got back home, he laid them out in order and was astonished to see quite clearly how, over time, the form of the one at the bottom turned into the form of the one at the top. Just gradual changes right way up through millions of years. In your face evidence for evolution, which I've got to be honest, I don't understand why this isn't taught in schools to this day. My point is that imagine if, as he went, Rowe had just tossed all the fossils into a bucket. Then when he looked through them later, all he would have seen would have been a jumbled collection of different species. No clue as to their relationship through time, and consequently the real importance of what he had found. Now, archaeology is just like that. And science has just got no place for impatience. So there's another biggie that Jimmy talks about. Another feature he talks about in a very conspiratorial way is what he describes as orchards of trees. These are actually olive trees, and they've actually been a massive pain for the archaeologists. Now, the conspiracy theorists will tell you that they are planting trees to stop you from excavating or some such nonsense. What the conspiracists fail to take into account is that when Göbekli Tepe was discovered, this was all private farmland, and pretty much worthless farmland at that. Now, when it became clear that this was a major discovery, it also became clear that the authorities would want to take ownership of the land to continue the excavations. So the farmers started planting olive trees as fast as they could to increase the value of the land by 10 to 20 times at least. Now, realistically, from $1,000 an acre to maybe $20,000 an acre, I'm not fully up on those on land prices today, but I know that's a ballpark figure anyway. So those trees are nothing to do with them trying to hide stuff from you. They're the result of poor people trying to make as much money from their land as they can. And frankly, you can't blame them for doing it. Now, this one may come as a bit of a shock to you. Do you know what? Governments aren't generally fussed about archaeology. Unless it's significant for the tourist industry, governments don't care. Now, it doesn't matter where in the world. Some excavations are funded by universities when they can afford it. Pretty much everything else is funded by tourism, or most of the time, development. You think, how often have you read something like Bronze Age site found during road building, or burial site uncovered during building work for a new housing estate? It's discovered because they were digging the land for profit. You can't avoid that, and it's crazy to imagine that every money-making scheme is a conspiracy. The problem is that conspiracy theorists, folks, they see these huge multinational corporations as part of a new world order trying to hide the truth from you. They're not. They just love money and want to make as much of it as they can. They don't care much about the details. And if they've funded excavations, they want to see that money back with a return on their investment. And they're fully aware that sites like Göbekli Tepe as a tourist attraction, it's only going to get more profitable as time goes on. Far from hiding it, they would absolutely love it if the archaeologists uncovered something spectacular. It would mean millions more dollars through tourism. Now, some people do like to say that they have a reason to hide the past from you, but seriously think that one through. There is no possible advantage, not a single one. Although, I mean, it says something about human nature that you write a book about archaeology, you might sell a few thousand copies, but if you write a book saying they're hiding it from you, you'll sell 1 million. Seriously, ask yourself, what amazing revelation from human past, from humanity's distant past, what amazing revelation would turn you into an anarchist or whatever, would make you rise up against these people who'd hidden it from you? What amazing thing would make you want to do that? Moving on, something else that Jimmy criticises is the and quite a lengthy criticism as well, of the canopy and the walkway construction put in for tourists. I can't break down the whole thing. I've had long conversations with archaeologists about how this was done and how it was planned. And it's long and it's complicated, and all I'll say at this point is I'd love to know what his solution to the problem would have been. I mean, what would Jimmy have suggested should have been done here? It's clearly a massively important site. The public want to see it, and if you don't put in walkways and things that enable the public to see it, then all you're going to do is have footfall across the site itself, which is going to totally destroy a load of the archaeology. So that just it can't be done. In actual fact, there's compromises in every the tourist structure that's put in a site. Frankly, they did a bloody good job at Gòbekli Tepe, and as I said, I'd like to know what Jimmy's solution would have been. Now, the last point that Jimmy makes, his big reveal, which he describes as a crime against humanity, is that there's the possibility that excavations will stop and the site will be left for future generations. And the thing is, There's just no truth in this whatsoever. It is completely made up. I know the coordinating archaeologists down there, and I know that there is no such cessation of activity has been suggested. The dig schedules are carrying on as normal. I was trying to think where that idea may have arisen, and it's possible. It's unlikely, but it's possible that it's misheard whispers about the cessation of excavations at the Ness of Brodgar on Orkney, without doubt one of the most important archaeological sites in the world. Now, excavations are going to stop at the Ness at the end of the season this year, 2024, and it will be covered up for the foreseeable future. The thing is that far from being any conspiracy nonsense, there's good reasons for this. Unless, of course, you're simply an impatient treasure hunter. I mean, imagine, so you go back to the 1940s and Willard Libby, University of Chicago, came up with the genius concept of carbon dating, something that completely transformed the world of archaeology. And the thing is, it was decades later that advances in biochemistry brought in other groundbreaking techniques like strontium analysis and protein recognition. I mean, not long ago, a piece of broken pot was just a piece of broken pot. But now, not only can you tell that maybe it contained milk, but you can tell whether it was sheep's milk or goat's milk or cow's milk. It just gives us so much more information about how our ancestors were living. We can tell that gold found in Germany actually came from Cornwall, or the person in that Bronze Age grave in Denmark grew up in Spain. The thing is that far from being a crime against humanity, this is actually a selfless act. It's putting, as a researcher, it's putting all that zealous enthusiasm to one side, in the knowledge that in 10 or 20 years from now, the inevitable advances in physics and chemistry will reveal far more information than we could possibly hope to achieve right now. I mean, the biggest sadness in all of this for me is that the archaeologists and researchers on the ground bust their arses to do their work the best way possible and bring the information to the public as quickly as they can. To accuse them of hiding information when you don't even put in the effort to read their latest research papers is at best disingenuous. But I'll bet the vast majority of conspiracy theorist folks have never sought out and read a scientific paper in their lives. Anyway, enough. If you've made it to here, then thank you very much for listening. If you want facts about prehistory without any of the conspiratorial nonsense, that hit like and subscribe and stick with the prehistory guys, because it's what we do. See you soon.